How have things been for the year at SpotMe? You know, we last spoke January 2021, so it's a further year ahead now.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
take me back to that last year for you, SpotMe, and the team?
So, I mean, 2020, I don't have to go back to it. We were primarily in-person, very in-person mobile app, very deep enterprise-based or large customers. And what happened is what pretty much everyone else in the industry did. Quickly added solutions, first adding streaming, then breakouts, and then essentially, from the first 3 months of the sort of first emergency, started to be very intentional on what is the product that we want to build for what's going to be next with events. And so we quickly, identified a couple of things. But one of them is that we didn't want to go down the route of integrations. So we wanted to build things ourselves. And that meant, building our own streaming and building our own breakouts and building our own studio. And the reason for this was that we are focusing 100% on larger enterprise customers. And for these customers, what's absolutely essential is access to the data. And to have access to the lowest level of data, you actually need to own the stack. You have to own the entire technology stack. So it's not just like building functionalities for the sake of it. You actually have to own what's going to happen there. And to provide that level of granularity and data, we took that brave route and painful route of building a lot of things. And so that's what we did. We've added a lot of functionality, and it was a very product intensive 2020, but also very product intensive 2021. And we doubled the size of the product and engineering team. Adding I think 3 product managers. I think we're now about 40 engineers and product people in the team. And quite frankly, it was cool to do that and easier to recruit than in the past because you can go out there and say, hey, we are in this industry. We're doing video, we're doing apps, we're doing mobile, we're doing web, and people are quite excited about it. So it was good because we could attract very, very strong talent.
Yeah, people didn't really know that industry existed until we had the pandemic, didn't it? It would have been. It wasn't a space that developers were looking to go into because no one had heard of it. They didn't know any of the brands or anything like that.
Yeah. No, from a business perspective, and I think I've spoken to other CEOs in the space. There was the initial rush, and people wanted to get the solution, but then of course, CEOs and investors and company shareholders, etc., what they're interested in is like, how do we drive the valuation? How do we drive the valuation of all our respective companies? And what you've seen with public companies, the likes like On24, but what you see with private companies like SpotMe is actually the same. What everyone is trying to do is like, how do I retain that customer base? How do I sell them, a software on a subscription basis? And this is where things became a little wild because everyone went with their own direction. Some people started to bundle services. Some people started to go like very cheap in their offering. Some people try to move upscale and increase their pricing, and then they got some bad reaction from the market. And so at the end of the day, I think everyone tried to do that. As far as we're concerned at SpotMe, we're extremely pleased because we were able to grow 110% year over year on a software recurring basis. So for us, that's excellent. On top of this, we're also growing the service revenue, which is also good because it also services drive adoption with customers. So overall, an excellent year.
And in terms of the types of events that were coming onto the platform last year compared to the year before, what differences were you seeing?
I love this. Love that question, William. So 2020, people had no idea, and we had no idea either. And so what essentially everyone was putting together is some sort of a pumped up webinar. And you do it the way you want it. At the end of the day, it's some sort of a webinar that people were putting together. What we've seen end of 2020, but certainly early 2021, is people becoming really intentional on like how they want to plan about this. And the way we like to think, and we see now customers talking that language, so I think it's now taken ground, is like there are 3 tiers of events, right? You have those tier 1 events, super high production values, typically hybrid, meaning in person and remote, with a multi-tracks, multi-stage breakouts, virtual breakouts, and in-person breakouts, typically several days, large attendance. Usually, if you're a company, this type of event, they eat up like half your budget. Like that single event is like half your budget. And it's a monster of complexity. You need 3 different agencies, 1 or 2 providers. There's different pieces of technology. That's tier 1 events. And then you've got tier 2, which is like probably you'll do a dozen of these every year. Could be hybrid, could be purely remote, could be purely virtual. But the thing is, much more streamlined. There's still some degree of complexity. You may have multiple stages, but shorter, smaller audiences, and typically many more of those you're doing throughout the year. Perhaps you do 1 for Europe, 1 for the US, 1 for APAC, and 1 for spring, and 1 for sales, and 1 for distributors, right? And then tier 3, it's essentially the webinars. Webinars or augmented webinars, up 1 to 4 hours, typically in duration, single session, down, maybe you may have some Q&A, etc. And the way why this is useful is people can think strategically in terms of like, what's my event portfolio? And so what we've seen in 2021, and we certainly see this in 2022, is like people coming and saying, hey, so I have 300 webinars. Okay, that's it. Then I also I'm planning, 10 tier 2 events, and then, I have 1 or 2 tier 1s. And I want to allocate my resources. I want to build my technology stack so that it serves, this portfolio in the best possible way.
So people are being more strategic now with their events certainly than it was so difficult to be strategic during 2020 because you didn't know what the next week held. But I would say that I think people are being more strategic about their events now than they were pre-pandemic. And I think a lot of organizations did have that. We've got these events. This is how we're doing it. And I think a lot of organizations have stepped back and said, what are our objectives? What are our resources? How can we deliver them better now that we've opened up these channels? Is that a good summary of where you think a lot of the clients are?
Totally. And there's also organizational change on the client side. And here I'm talking more corporate customers, and more specifically on the marketing. So people inviting customers to their events. And what we've seen now is event planners being sort of a standalone entity somewhere in the company, often outside of the company, now being like part of marketing. I've consistently hear this from event planners. We've been merged with marketing. And I always think like, my God, what were you guys doing before? Because that sounds like marketing. But now it's like this huge organizational change. And I think every Fortune 500 we're speaking with, they are telling us now, we think in-person, hybrid, virtual events, webinars, they're all part of that marketing portfolio or activities that we're planning.
Absolutely. It's a marketing and it's the comms. I remember I started at the Council Mortgage Lenders in about 2007, and I went into the organization and we had a little events team, 5 people in the events team. You would walk up the stairs, through the office, through all the policy, past the chief executive, through everything, and then round the corner, there was one office, and that was where the event organizers were. And the first thing I said to them is, we have to come out of here and we have to sit in the rest of the business. We have to be not quite at the center of it. That's where your policy was, but we have to be part of it. We have
that metaphor where you were literally aside. Usually it's in the basement, but in your case, you went up. So good.
Yeah. And you're so right. I think the pandemic has proved to so many organizations that it's not an event, it's what comes out of it. It's the marketing, it's the comms, and it's decisions that are made. And I think that the pandemic helped us, but also the quality of the platforms and the technology we've got now allowed us to achieve that.
That's true. William, I always love when I see you posting on LinkedIn saying it's not acceptable in 2021 that people have to say next in a virtual event. I think you're driving the standards up, but what you have to realize is that for most people, all that stuff is still new. But I appreciate you pushing the bar higher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to do with the virtual event campus, of course, is to say to people that it's not okay just to run a virtual event. And maybe it was back in 2020, but we have to do this really, really well for not just the reasons for you as an individual organizer to become more skilled or your business to do better, but also from this kind of environmental and climate aspect as well. We have to make sure that there's value that comes out of that. So looking ahead, I'd be interested to see how far ahead you think we're looking. But what's your views on kind of Internet 3.0 and the metaverse? Where do you see SpotMe as an organization, a platform, and events as a more general concept within this new kind of paradigm?
So we've grown significantly as a company. So it also means we're looking at acquisitions and potential, new technologies or companies or startups that we can bring on board. And we've looked at several of them. And I have to say, I was recently very impressed with some of the stuff that I've seen. Historically, I've been really a 2D type. If I could call myself like this, it was hard for me to,
Me too.
To like, what's the value there? I've seen things where I believe there's still a lot of work, but I do see the power of the metaverse. Just to be very precise, a lot of people have been talking about serendipity of events and how in-person events, basically allow you to get lost. They allow you to get lost in the halls and make some random encounters. And it seems that people miss that experience. And what I've experienced personally is with 3D or metaverse-like environments and events, you can recreate that, or at least that was the major benefit that I saw. Now, okay, a year ago, what was this thing called Clubhouse that everyone said we needed to do events on? Things come and go, and people retain, remember, or they keep what they think really makes sense. To be honest, and I think you're totally right when you're pointing out, like, hey, don't say next, to move to the next slide. I don't think this year is going to be on the bells and whistles. I think this year is going to be on, like, how do we get the clarity to execute in this volatile environment? I don't think it's going to be like who can do Bitcoin, who can do blockchain, who can do metaverse, who can do X and Y. I've seen less and less of that, what I call bells and whistles. It's a bit derogatory because actually it's not, right? It's also progress and novelty and innovation. But I do see the focus on, like, how can we efficiently deliver? Who is the best provider who can provide me with, I don't know, the certification program where I can train my 20 people so that they can actually run this stuff? How can you help me scale my program? What's the integration with my stack? Much more mundane topics than the ones that you've listed. So the answer to your question is, I'm looking at it very closely. There are some very good things. It's going to take 2 to 3 years to see some, I would say, productive usage of this technology. And it's certainly something we're into as well.
That's really interesting, and I would agree with that. I think the timeline I think now is about testing and having a little play and looking at things, but expecting people to jump into this very much more immersive world. I don't think we're ready for that. I certainly think that, looking ahead to maybe 2030, I think if you've got virtual and digital events, it's likely that there'll still be older young dads, older folk like you or I, who will say, do you know what, I'm fine with the 2D. That's what I want. But I can see a world where platforms like SpotMe have got a much more immersive platform for an event at the same time as they've got more of a 2D, because I definitely think this will be user driven, and you can see the benefits and already the time that not just younger people, but the majority of younger people are spending in these types of environments. But that does look quite far ahead.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, right? I'm also a big Counter-Strike fan. I like this, but there's certain things that I like in that world, and there's some of the things that I prefer in the current world we're in. So I think we'll see. It's technology at the end. What matters is what people.
It's fun. One of the things I like in the kind of the immersive platforms at the moment is when you can speed up the character so it can run. So you've got your little avatar running through an exhibition hall, and I thought I would love to do that. In real life, just to run.
I was on the call because this is one of the innovational novelties. I'm not quite sure yet that we're hearing, but there's a ton of other things, right? When you see companies, everything around, video filtering, video enhancement, sensing emotions, etc., enhancing the sort of the speaker experience, to understand, whether people are actually listening to you or not, all this kind of things. I was on the call recently with a a startup in the US, and the value that they essentially offering is to help people join meetings late and run them twice the speed to catch up. Because their claim is that a lot of that stuff is useless. People stammer, people have, so you can actually do this at half the time.
You're right, though. These do seem quite frivolous, but I think we've got a lot of learning to make the content that we've got appropriate and of value before we move into this world of exactly how do you experience this. I mean, I listened to, I'm studying at the moment, and my lecture was a 12-minute lecture, and I sped it up to 1.5 because it was a recording, and it was done in in 8 minutes compared to 12 minutes.
I had a student pitching me this thing. He actually came up. It's a student at the university in Switzerland, and he came up and he said, "Hey, I see what you're doing. This is my prototype, and it does exactly this. You can upload your lecture, and he detects all the stammering, the silence, the breaks, etc. And he claims he can compress it to 30% less."
Yeah, absolutely. But that's an advantage of the virtual world, isn't it? You can speed things up. There's a lot that you can do. Getting back to the platform, what have you added? Let's say over the last 12 months, and in terms of the service or more kind of product aspect to it, and where do you see the changes in the next 12 months?
So let's focus on product first. So the big stuff that we did on the product is we focused on how can we enhance the live experience. So most platform people join and they watch the videos. So how do we enhance the video? So how do we do high resolution, low latency? How do we do more interactive options? How do we do a richer, better Q&A? How do we provide more options for moderator? But first of all, focus on the participant experience. So it is a lot of small incremental things that we've done. So that was number one. Then we focused on production organizer. How do we help people do this with the same tools? How do we help them, look better? How do we help them do this in less time? So there's a ton of things here. So we launched our own studio. So pre 2021, most of our customers will use StreamYard or will use Zoom to basically capture. And now we have, I think, about 60% of them using our studio, a built-in studio tool. And that's something we've seen with a lot of other platforms as well, but it's a very expensive investment.
Yeah, and you were one of the first to do that, weren't you? I remember when we were speaking, that was what you were doing in the next couple of months, and you were ahead of a lot of the other platforms.
Yeah, and it's painful and it's expensive. But the thing is that if you want to really, you could license it with somebody else. There's a lot of options out there. You could get a Restream, you could get which some of the platforms have, taken. But the thing is, if you want to have a seamless speaker experience where you want to have the Q&A coming straight into your speaker console, which is the studio we're in right now, it has to be the same tool. And it's kind of it's one of these things that are very expensive, but you can't take the shortcut, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, depending on which side you are. So providing that super simple speaker experience so that people can basically run their events, because that's the main pain point that we've seen. And that brings me to the next product that we've launched. We've actually launched a downsized version of SpotMe Anywhere. It's called SpotMe Express. And what we figured is people doing those tier 3 events, they didn't want to buy services. They didn't want to get any help. They just wanted to spin something that is as simple as a webinar, but looks good like a virtual event. And so we've repackaged that into a simpler product. It literally takes 5 minutes to set up your reg page and launch invites. And that's what we've done. Next up, what we've done is we've launched templates, and actually we're now in the process of developing 20 plus event templates so that people don't have to think, do I have a tier 2 hybrid events with 2 sides? Okay, here's the template. And it comes with the personalized agenda, with on-site audience, hub audiences, with preloaded areas for downloading documents. It has the virtual exhibition if you need one. And so you don't have to figure out what's special, etc. And it really makes it super tailored. And most clients actually, what they're telling us is they take the templates, they fork the templates, and then they actually build their own templates on it. And we love this because it's just allowed them to do more events and simpler without the time. Okay, last thing. What we've launched at the end of last year is the Content Hub. And this is something we believe that virtual event we talked earlier about how, marketing and event is now the same thing. Well, what event planners don't know is that marketers, they're just sitting in the corner and they're watching, what am I going to do with all those hours of videos that you guys have recorded? And the reality is your event content, and most planners, most organizers, they don't understand this, but your event content is gold. Because what do you have? You have people who looks genuine. Yes, they're not flawless. They have their, but it's genuine. They usually are your customers, your providers, employees, your best ambassador, and they're talking about your business, usually your product, your services, in a way that they never do. Ask a customer for a reference, or hey, do you want to sit on my ad? People say no. Do you want to come to my event and talk about? Everyone says yes. And here you go. You have the best marketing content out there. So what we did with the Content Hub is that it basically helps you cut and create libraries that you can put gated or ungated on your website or on your virtual event platform you pick, for letting people consume that content without necessarily joining the event. And then it gives them the possibility to sign up for the next one. It gives them it's also a lead magnet, so they can request more information, they can sign up for your service. And I think that's something that not a lot of people have done. I see them coming up. A lot of people do it by themselves. They put this up on Vimeo, and then they create some sort of Drupal or WordPress integration to put all. So it's a lot of manual work, and we thought, hey, let's make something super easy here.
Well, that's fantastic. So is that Content Hub effectively built on post-event? So you have your event, and then the Content Hub is afterwards.
It's even better. It's across events. So you literally take all your events that you had in your organization. You say this one. Oh, this stream. Boom, 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 boom. You tag it. Next thing that we're doing, by the way, that brings me to this year, is we're adding recommendation. It's because that, depending on who you are, at Netflix, will tell you should be watching this. At the end of the day, 60% of the video that's being watched right now is on demand. It's not live. So I think there's also a device here a lever to multiply engagement and participation with better on demand.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's really good to see that you're doing that, because that's certainly something I've been pushing organizations to do for as long as I've been doing consultancy, is this kind of ring the content that you've got, make the most out of it, because it's gold dust. Do different stuff with it. And this idea of kind of evergreen content as well, I think is really important. So it's great to see you doing that. So I definitely feel that, you've identified it a little bit earlier in our talk there, but there is a missing piece still, and that we've got products and we've got services, but they're still not living up to what they can really do. And that is a little bit on terms of what the platforms are able to do, but a big part for me on what the organizers are doing in terms of planning and delivering the content. And I think when we master those two things, we'll be in a much better position as an industry of the technology. Would you agree?
Yeah, I didn't tell you what we were going to do in 2022, by the way. And the answer is we are going to help people connect all those pieces. The pain point right now is how difficult it is to have the proper reg page that actually sits on my website, that actually connects with my marketing, with my Marketo, my HubSpot, that then does the right email cadences for people who are invited, did not respond, or did come but didn't join, etc., all the way to going into whatever, SpotMe, Hopin, or any of those platforms, having the actual experience and getting the data back into the CRM or into marketing automation. Nobody does this properly. You'll be amazed by the amount of plumbing that people have and hacks that people had to come up with. As a technology CEO, I'm ashamed. And it's not, I can see this confidently, this is across the board. So our mission this year is very simple, and we've set this as our goal for our own events that we do as SpotMe. We want to write the book on how you can simply and effectively execute events end-to-end, from, hey, I want an event, I need to put this up on my webpage, and doing the actual marketing of it, all the way to driving people into it, to having the actual event with engagement and content, and then bringing all this stuff back into our marketing and our sales stack. And it sounds simple, but in reality, it's extremely difficult.
No,
it's going to take us a year to do that.
Yeah, it sounds simple to someone who's not tried to do it. But for anyone who's tried to do it like I have, and all the students and the people I've been helping, you're right. It's a complete kind of smorgasbord of different stuff that we're putting together. Well, that's really exciting, and I certainly really look forward to seeing where you've taken the platform and all the extra things, because it's much bigger than a platform now, isn't it? You know, when we started pre-pandemic, it was very clear we knew what it was. It was a platform that had content, people could meet, you could show some logos, and that was it. But now
stops here, and now it doesn't. Right.
Well, Pierre, thanks very much for your time. It's been fascinating as always, hearing your views and finding out what SpotMe's been up to and what the next year holds for you. Thanks very much for your time.
I do have one request though. You're one of the very few voices in the industry to consistently remind people that actually traveling to events is one of the worst things that we can do. And I think it's one of the opportunities. People have been quick to dismiss this. I thought it was finally an opportunity to be serious about it. People have been very quick to dismiss this point. You consistently bring this up. I wanted to tell you that, at SpotMe, we're following very closely all the things you're saying about, how events should be much more environmentally conscious. We've seen this change with customers. Our customers, they're not advertising this, but they're putting policies in place to restrict people traveling to events. I think it's going to be one of the drivers actually for growth and for people actually staying to virtual events. And so I wanted to tell you that we wanted you to continue pushing that message out.
Thank you. That's very nice to see. And be assured, I will.
I'm sure you seem very committed to it. All right.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for your time, Pierre.
Thanks.